Well, now we're joined by Nina Benote. She is a top 20 RE/MAX realtor in Texas with RE/MAX Premier Group. Nina, great to see you again.
It's great to be back.
So Nina, today we're going to talk a little bit about what happens after the offer gets accepted. I think people know how to prepare. They go through all of the turmoil of purchasing a home, putting an offer in, and then it gets accepted. What's the next step?
So I think once it gets accepted, then like the fun part actually starts. So then you go into an option period. So an option period can be anywhere from 5 to 7 to 10 days. In our market, we usually see 7 days. In really maybe multiple competitive offers, you see 5 days. And so what an option period is the seller is taking their house off the market for a period of time to allow the buyer to do their inspections, all their due diligence, and really decide if they're going to go forward with purchasing the house. And for this option period, you usually will pay an option fee. The buyer will pay an option fee to the seller. Again, it's usually between $100 to $500, depending on how competitive the buyer wants to get. But during those 7 days of the option period, we want to negotiate any repairs between buyer and seller, get them all agreed to and signed off. And during that option period, the buyer can back out for any reason, but the majority of times the buyer and seller are able to work it out and you get through your option period. So that would be the first stage.
So once you get through that option period, then what?
So then if a buyer is going to do financing, then the appraisal is going to be ordered. So the appraisal is usually around $500, and the lender is going to send an appraiser out because they want to make sure the house is actually worth what the buyer is offering to pay for it. A lot of times the appraisal will come in at value or a little bit above value. And if it comes below value, then the buyer and seller will go through another renegotiation process and try to agree on price. If you're going to do a cash deal, you don't need to do an appraisal. But sometimes a buyer might want to do one just to try to find out, what is the appraised value of the home.
So if an appraisal does come in at value or actually above value, what does that mean for the home seller and what does that mean for the buyer?
So for the home seller, it just means the deal's going to go through. There's really, nothing on their part. For the buyer, when it comes in at value or above value, that's a good thing, especially if it comes up above value, because then it's like they have a little bit of built-in equity in the house. So they may be paying $400,000 for the house. The appraisal may come in at $410,000, so they just got a little bit of a deal on the house. They got it for less than the appraisal value.
How do you walk your clients through this process? There's so many variables that can really change the scenario.
When you're talking about the appraisal, I think that you're kind of looking at what the market is doing, what the comps are in the neighborhood, and you kind of prep them and tell them that it looks like the property will appraise. The only time where there may be a situation where it may not appraise is if you have a multiple offer situation and the buyer has chosen to offer more money and then really kind of escalated the purchase price. So you try to get them prepped for the different scenarios that can happen, and when they do come up, walk them through the different options that can happen.
And then the last step, the closing.
So yes, so we'll have the closing, which is the best day in the process. But prior to the closing, one other thing that we would do is called a final walkthrough. So a final walkthrough happens about a day or two before the closing, and you're just going to see the home is in the same condition it was when we first put the contract on it, and also visually if there's any repairs we check them at that time. But a walkthrough is important because I can tell you a story where me and a client went through a walkthrough, and when the sellers were moving, the washing machine wasn't disconnected properly, so the whole first floor had flooded. So we had to really work through that. And once a buyer closes on the house, everything becomes their responsibility. So it's important to do that walkthrough just to make sure there's no issues with the house. And then once we've done that, we hit the best day in the process, which is the closing day. So that's when the buyer and seller go to the title company, they sign all the documents. Once the loan gets funded, they can go pick up the keys, and then you have your exciting moving day and get to move into the house.
Nina, that's when I think you pop the champagne bottle.
Exactly.
Well, Nina, great advice today as always. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back with more of the show.